Hello, so today we're going to be going over a positioning guide. So this is something that comes a little bit intuitively if you played a lot of sets of TFT, but if this is your first set of TFT, I think one of the biggest problems that beginners might have, or people that aren't that familiar with the game might have, is not only building the board, but so much of the board also matters with how you position them. Right, so there's a lot of aspects of like first I have to make the board, I have to click the right units, have the right items, and a lot of times you get lost and it's very difficult. But then there's also this aspect of all these little hexagons, right? Where do I put my units? Do I put them here? Do I put them here? Do I put them here? It becomes really difficult, and sometimes it can really sway the fight, and it's something that's really slept on a lot of the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a general positioning guide, as well as I'm going to go over as many of the units I can think of where positioning matters quite a bit, and I'll try and highlight the unique aspects of those units. We'll probably start with 4 costs because they're pretty general, and then we'll go through each of them. And if there's somebody that I missed, you can ask for your opinion. If there's something that you want to say or ask questions about anything, go ahead. This is serving to be like a general guide, right? I am a top 1% diamond / master level player right now. My lobbies are usually a mix of diamond / masters players. I'm in diamond right now. So that's who I am as a person. If you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe. I do daily VOD reviews, and that's the main way that I try and create content in order to help other people learn the game of TFT, because I find it quite fun. Anyways, let's go through positioning. So the first thing you should always know is just general positioning. Let's just build like a vague board, right? Let's just go like Vanguard. Let's just pick a couple of them. Let's put like these guys, and then let's put in I don't know. Let's pick some backline units. Let's just put a Karma. Let's just put a this guy and this guy. Who cares what they are, right? We're not really worried about the exact board, right? The idea is that you usually have something that's like a front. This is going to be your front or your front line, and then you have your back line, right? So you have your front line and you have your back line. And basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to position units that are usually tanks go in the front line. So units such as the ones that I picked with the Vanguard trait are obviously going to go in the front, because they're going to try and soak up damage, and they're not really concerned with dealing damage, they're just soaking up damage. And then you're trying to keep some of these more frail units that do a bunch of damage safe and being in the back line, and these are typically your carries. So in general, the way that you usually position is you're trying to make a main tank. So for example, let's say I have a Tahm Kench 2 and I have a Karma 2. These are the main units that I'm using in order to deal damage, and we'll put some items on them just for the sake of explanation. Well, I don't know why it's not. Hello? Well, I guess the items aren't working. Maybe it's oh, there we go. Let's put it like that. There we go. So let's just say you have items on your units. Typically you're going to put your items on your main tank, and a lot of the times I'll just put here basic, right? Your basic positioning is carry in the corner, tank, front, middle, right? I could probably write that a little bit neater, but basically you always usually want to put your main tank in the front middle and your carry in either this corner or this corner. And switching the side is usually like the main, depending on what carry you're playing. And the idea is that you want your carry to be safe while you want your main tank to try and soak up as much damage as possible, so all the other sources kind of hit towards this main tank. Sometimes, depending on certain matchups, you'll put your main tank off to the side. That's usually like if like your opponent is clustered on one side, so you want them all to target the main tank this way, and then maybe get like a wrap with some of your other units. But we'll talk about that in a second. Now let's go over let's just go over like in general, like building a front line and building let's go over, after building a front line, just in general, like some of the 4 costs and how they want to be positioned. So I'm just gonna put some random units on both sides of the board. So let's just start with, we'll put 2 vanguards here, and we'll put 4 vanguards on one side, then we'll put 4 shapeshifters on the other side, just so that they look like they're different units, so it's a little bit easier to tell what's going on. So we'll do something like this, and where is it? Nico, and then I want a Varus, which we'll put on this side, and this side we'll just play whatever, right? So here, I'm just gonna go over basic positioning, right? And we'll go through all the units that we can. So in terms of backline units that you can play Callista, you can play Karma, you can play Nami, you can play Rise, and you can play Varus. These are the backline units that are 4 cost units, typically. So when you're playing around these units, typically it depends on how they hit. Basically, if you are playing Karma or Rise, typically you want to place them on the same side as your opponent's carry. So Karma and Rise, I'll put them in this corner relative to the Varus, right? So these ones you'll usually put in this corner, and these ones you usually put in this corner. Why? So if you read Karma, I'll try and hover over Karma right now. Karma, she basically does damage to 2 enemies, and that damage can be to any 2 enemies. So she'll hit one enemy and she'll hit another one. Rise also spreads damage over multiple enemies. Because both of these units can hit random enemies, you want them to have a path such that they can hit the enemy carry. Because if you kill the enemy carry by random chance, then the enemy carry is dead. They lose a bunch of their damage and you will probably win the fight. So typically when you are playing Rise, you always want to put Rise on the same side as the enemy, and you want to put Karma on the same side as the enemy. What that means is that you're going to try and scout, you're going to try and look at who the threat is when you're scouting for other people's boards, and you're going to try and put Rise or Karma on the same side as the enemy carries. A lot of times people are trying, typically with a carry, you want to put them opposite of each other. So for example, Kalista or Varus or Nami, a lot of times if these are carries, you're putting them on the opposite side because you're just trying to make it you're trying to have as little interaction between these two as possible, and instead you're trying to focus on whoever's front line loses, then you snipe the back line. Kalista, for example, you always want to be on the opposite side of a carry because Kalista is a Gwinsu user. Typically with Kalista, you will put a Gwinsu on her, and because of that, you want her to ramp up. As a result, you want her to have as much time as possible. So even if your front line dies, you want the Kalista to ramp up as much as possible, so you want her to be as far away from the enemy carry as possible, because basically when your frontline units start to die, a lot of times these units start to walk up, and they start to move forward in order to get an enemy in range in order to do damage. You want this Kalista to be as far away as possible so she does not get targeted. Nami is the same way. Now Nami usually isn't a carry. I'm just going to remove some of these other units from the board just so we can clear it up a little bit. Nami, if you read Nami, her ability, basically she'll fire a bubble at the largest group of enemies, and then every third cast she'll summon a Leviathan, which stuns. If you haven't seen what Nami does, basically she does this whole board wide stun, which is around 3 hexes wide if I'm not mistaken, but basically it will go through the whole board. Now what she's going to do is she's going to target the largest clump. So if you look at right now at the way people typically put their boards, there's going to be a large clump towards the center. So you always want Nami to be opposite of the opponent's carry or their main carry. The reason you want Nami on the opposite side is because Nami is going to target the main clump, which is right here, and then you can draw a line to the main clump and then extend it, and that's the way your stun is going to go. So you want to be on the opposite side so that you get the most value. You want to hit the stun. Stunning the front line doesn't matter that much. It could matter in some cases, but you want to definitely stun the backline unit. So typically Nami, you're playing on the opposite side as the opponent. Now what if they clump all their units on one side? Well then your Nami might miss. This happens sometimes with melee units. As you can see, if you draw a line towards the largest clump, the Nami might miss the backline carry. In that case, you want to position your Nami always so that if you were to draw a line between Nami and the clump of units that's in the front, you're trying to make it so that she always is square hitting the backline unit such that you do damage to the backline unit, as well as stun the backline unit so that they don't do as much damage. They're basically going to be unable of moving for a while. So that's the first thing in general. Now Varus also hits a largest clump, if I'm not mistaken. Supernova at the largest clump of enemies within the attack range +1 hex. So Varus is a little bit weird. There's a lot of different positionings that you can play around Varus. Typically, it's opposite side of the carry. That's just to keep Varus safe, because Varus is really slow to cast a lot of times, so you want the Varus to take as much time as possible. However, this is a big thing to note. Something that's really important is if the enemy has a very clumped backline, you will sometimes see Varus being in a little bit of an awkward spot. Let's say they have a backline that looks something like this, right? They're sleeping on the job. So as you can see, they have this really big clump here, and then they have this clump that's a little bit further out. What you'll see a lot of times is that Varus, people will place the Varus on the same side in the third row. That is because the +1 range, I believe Varus has a 4 hex range. So if you count 4 hexes, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a 4 hex range +1, so 5. If there's a large clump where the enemy backline is, positioning the Varus in the third row could make it so that the Varus snipes a lot of the backline units. So that's why sometimes you'll see people say put Varus in the third row. I don't believe in it that much. I think it's very situational and you're putting your Varus at risk. The main reason you want to put your units in the back corners is because you want it so that if, like, for example, your front line starts to die and then these units start to walk up, you don't want your Varus to be over here so he starts to get targeted. You want him to be as far away as possible so he's the last person that gets dealt with, so you take as little damage as possible. So that's something that's really important. And I think that, like, you know, positioning in certain ways can sometimes grief you in a bad spot. It can put you in a very awkward position that can really affect you negatively as if you just follow a cookie cutter strategy. Now, there's some forecasts that I didn't quite show. Those are Fiora, Gwen, and Olaf. As well as there's the tanks, which I'll talk about in a second, but let's just talk about carries. Now, in terms of these ones, Gwen doesn't really do anything where you need to position her in any certain way. She dashes around a lot, so it's very hard to predict exactly where she will go. I usually try and hope that my Gwen can get a wrap, so I try and position her not towards the center, but towards one of the fringe sides, so that if she happens to kill and dash, she can maybe make it to the back line somehow. But it feels very random, so I wouldn't worry too much about Gwen. Fiora, however, is very important to position around. If you read her, she sweeps through the most enemies possible within 2 hexes after leaping backwards. So right now, I'm going to remove some of my frontline units. We will remove them for the time being. I'm going to put Gwen back, just because, let's just say we're playing like a warrior game to give us the illusion of things looking really nice, right? And let's say they have a backline that looks something like this. Sure. What Fiora will do, this is how you usually phrase or look at Fiora. Fiora, what she does is, let's say she is attacking the Nico. So she's attacking this way, right? Fiora attacking the Nico here. What happens with Fiora is Fiora will, when she casts, take a step back. So she steps back here. And then she will look for the largest clump of enemies. I think she has a 3 hex range. So she makes like a little border kind of like this. And she looks around. And as you can see, this is the largest clump, so then she will attack and dash through, and she'll end up either here or here, usually. That's how Fiora usually goes. She'll go like a step back, she'll go here, she'll step back, she'll look around, and then she'll boom. She'll go right through. She'll pop out here or here. Let's just say she pops out here for the sake of example. The position around Fiora is very important. Now, Fiora is very easy to get to the backline. As you can see, I put 3 units in the backline here. Siobhan and Warwick aren't backline units, but just for the sake of example, assume that they are staying there, right? Let's say some of the frontline units die. Now she's attacking this Swain, right? Or this Nico, because she would attack the closest units. Let's say their frontline dies by the time Fiora casts a second time. Well, let's say she's attacking Swain now. She's going to step back. And what do you know? Bang! She's now attacking the backline. And she spreads her damage against the backline, and that's how you can get an easy wrap with Fiora. Fiora is very, very strong. A lot of times you have to think 2 steps ahead, right? A lot of times when you're positioning units, let me just find another shapeshifter for sake of example. Let's just put an Elise. There we go. Actually, I have this guy. When you're planning around the Fiora, a lot of times what you want to do is you want to plan the Fiora for two moves ahead. Right? So you want to think, okay, I dash one way, then I dash another way. So if they have a particularly clumped backline, so for example, let's say this guy has, I don't know, let's just say he has 3 Varuses for fun on his backline, like this. It makes a lot of sense to go like this, because then when Fiora dashes through the Nico, she'll take a step back, and as you can see, if she looks in her range of 3 hexes, there's a good chance that she'll attack this group of 3, because it's like a 50-50, and this is the group that's closer, or whatever. She just looks for the largest clump. So it's very easy for her to wrap, because whenever she dives the first front line, she's then attacking backwards. So then when she takes a step back, now she's like very much in range of a lot of the backline units. So if they have a backline that's very clumped, you want to try and position your Fiora to try and get to that side. That's the main thing. So this is the side that the Varuses are on. So I position my Fiora to try and get to that side. Ideally, like let's say, or alternatively, let's say the Varuses are on this side. Then what I'm going to try and do is I'll probably position my Fiora more on this side. I'll probably position her either here or here, because when she takes her step back, I want her to dash through in order to attack all of the units here. Now, this is something in general I'll also mention with Olaf, because Olaf's over here. Let's just put another hunter for example's sake for Olaf. This applies to both Gwen and Fiora as well. It applies to a lot of melee units as well as ranged units, but mostly melee units. When you are a melee unit, let's remove these guys. Let's just put all the melee units, right? let's say you're a melee unit. You might look at this board and say, well, who's attacking who? Is Gwen attacking Nico or is Gwen attacking Swain? They're both in range, Fenrir. Which one is the Gwen attacking? The thing is, Gwen can attack either the Nico or the Gwen can attack the Swain. Now, if you want to guarantee the Gwen attacking one of the units, what you could do is you can put them in the second row. Basically, if you put them one row back and there's nothing here that changes their routing, the shortest route that they will have is to walk forward in this case. Sometimes if the enemies have a lot of frontline units, it might interfere with their AI and then they'll move a little bit to the side. But generally speaking, if you want Gwen to target Swain, you will put Gwen one hex behind. Now, this is a little bit risky, obviously, especially if you don't have a regular frontline unit. A lot of times this is really good, for example, if you have, let's say you're playing like Preservers and you have a Rakan. That's pretty normal. If you have a Rakan here, you know, these units aren't going to walk up. They're just going to target the Rakan. So then somebody like Gwen can easily target this Swain because she'll just walk up, right? She'll walk up to one of these two hexes, but her AI will be targeting the Swain, so she'll usually target the Swain. That's a nifty trick on if you want somebody to target a particular frontline unit. Why is that important? Well, let's put in a Hunter and I'll tell you why. Olaf. If you hover the Hunter trait, what does the Hunter trait say? Hunters gain attack damage increase the first time they get a takedown each combat. Olaf, I very rarely, unless you're targeting like a Shyvana like this, I very rarely put Olaf in the front line. Because putting Olaf in the front line, a lot of times he takes aggro early. It makes things really stressful, especially if you don't have an Edge of Night where you can de-aggro and heal up. Your Olaf might be dead before Hunter even procs. But the idea is, let's say there's a Nasus 2, a Nico 2, a Swain 2, and this is a Shyvana 1. Right? Let's say this is a Shyvana 1. What I want to do is I want this Olaf to target the Shyvana. So I can either place, I'm not going to place the Olaf here. 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 I can either place him right here, such that the closest unit is the Shyvana, so he's front rowed and he just immediately attacks the Shyvana. Or I'll place him one row back if I want to play it safe, and then he'll walk up and target the Shyvana. Right? Even if the units are like this, he'll walk up and target the Shyvana. Placement is really important when you're playing Hunter because you want the Olaf to target. You never want to put the Olaf on one of their tanks. Like, let's say this is a Swain 3. You don't want to position your Olaf like this. Because if your Olaf is here or here or here and he's fighting this Swain, he might never proc Hunter. And if he doesn't proc Hunter, he won't get the extra damage for the takedown. So especially with Hunter, for example with Olaf, you want to position him on the side of the shittiest tank. Let's say the tank is over here, good, I put him here. Let's say the tank's over here, good, I put him here. You want to look at your opponent and pick the shittiest tank that you can find, and you want to put him right in front of it. Either here or here, so he walks up and he targets it. It's very, very important because then he'll proc Hunter, and then he'll jump around, and he'll go nuts, and then you win the fight. That's basically what you have to do. So that's how you position with Olaf. In terms of other tanks, the other ones don't really matter that much. It's really hard to play around them. For example, Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench, if you read Tahm Kench, he will target, he will send a shockwave towards the furthest enemy within 4 hexes. So 4 hexes is a lot, right? If you count like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you count this way, 1, 2, 3, 4. He basically has a range. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. He basically has a range that's like everything but the corner. You know what I mean? Like, this is his range for where he's targeting, because it says 4 hexes. Roughly speaking, like, this isn't scientifically perfect, my circle, right? So it's really hard to position him. What I usually do is I will put him, like, it's hard to position. I usually put him in the center, right? Because, like, obviously if he's in the center, as you can see, the only units that he doesn't necessarily target is this side and this side. The thing is that then sometimes you don't hit the enemy carry. So a lot of times I'll just pick a side that is the same size the enemy carry, and I'll kind of hope that they don't have like a full backline. So for example, let's say they have units like this. Let's say this is their whole board, right? Let's say this is their whole board. In this case, and let's say this is a Varus. Let's just switch them out. Let's just say this is a Varus 2, and then let's find some shitter Tristana, right? It's very situational, but in this case, where do I put my Tahm Kench? Do I put him here? 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 A lot of times I'll just put him here. Like this spot exactly. Because this spot, as you can count, 1, 2, 3, 4, it'll target the Varus. If you count this Tristana, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, the Tristana is out of the range of the Tahm Kench. right? It's more than 4 hexes away. So if Tahm Kench is targeting the furthest unit, he'll target this way and he'll always target the Varus, and it works kind of like the Nami stun, where he'll then stun towards the Varus. Obviously, this is very hard to deal with a lot of the time. So a lot of times, like, you know, you can equally, if you don't have a main tank as a Tahm Kench, you can equally put him in some sort of awkward spot off to the side. The thing is, then you risk that he will target the frontline unit as the furthest unit and stun this way as opposed to this way. It's a little bit difficult, so I usually like to put him in the center and try and target towards this Varus. Obviously, if they have a backline where they have multiple backline units, so let's just take, I don't know, like a Smolder, for example. If they have multiple backline units, if they have one here, for example, then you run into like a spot where it's like the Tahm Kench might stun this way when you want him to stun this way because they're equidistant apart. It's hard to deal with. Because the range is so big on the Tahm Kench, it's hard to like isolate a particular unit if they have a clumped backline. But you should just pay attention to it, especially if they have a sparse backline. If they do not have a large backline, it's very easy to position the Tahm Kench such that you hit one versus the other. Likewise, if they have like 1 or 2 backline units and they're both on the same side, then the same thing applies, right? You can put the Tahm Kench leaning this way, Varus is going to be further than Smolder, and the Tahm Kench will target that way. Now, in terms of other units, we went through all the 4 costs, right? Primarily. That's pretty good. Some of the other ones apply in a similar way, right? There's a lot of dashing around with Camille, so I usually place her similar to a Gwen. Briar does also this large stun towards the largest group of enemies. So a lot of times with the Briar, you don't want to like put her too much on the fringes. She's going to leap into everybody. And then like maybe she can get a leap onto the backline if they have a clumped backline. So you want to position her similar to Fiora, where she's going to leap and she's going to stun. And maybe if you make it to like the backline, she doesn't take a step back though, like Fiora, she just leaps. So it's a little bit harder for her to get a wrap on the backline, but you can always try for it, right? Think 2-step procedure. And then in terms of other 5 costs, a lot of them are just like in general, you just place them wherever, like if they're a frontline unit and they're your main tank, you place them in the front and center. If they're like a side tank, you can put them on the side, like a secondary tank. But a lot of times you're just trying to position them either same side or opposite. Like for example, like Zephr just hits the whole board, right? So so you usually just want to keep Zephr safe, so you put him opposite side of the carry. Even though the Zephr can potentially kill, like for example, if there's like a Rise on the other side, you just want Zephr to live as long as possible because Zephr takes so long to cast. So you always want to put on opposite side, make sure to keep him safe. Smolder runs around, so you can't really position that well for it. And Diana does this thing where she dashes within 2 hexes to the most enemies. So she's the same way, but so because she has like a huge AoE, typically I will place her on the same side as the carry. Because even though she dashes to the most enemies, right, she'll dash to the most enemies within 2 hexes, I usually want her to be somewhat relatively close to the same side, but I wouldn't want to put her here and then have her dash and be out of range of the Rise. You will always want to put her in such a way that she's probably same side as the carry so that she can get that AoE. Because she does like this giant magic shield and then she does this AoE damage for enemies 2 hexes away. So long as she's like somewhere in this spot, you'll see that she'll hit the enemy carry because this is 2 hexes away if she gets to here. So you always want to plan it such that she's leaping or dashing towards the side of the carry. What I usually do is I'll just put her on like a fringe side. Like I'll put her here if I'm trying to get her to target the enemy. And it usually works out. You could try and make her go like through. I don't think she dashes through people. She dashes to hit the most enemies possible. She dashes through, but like it's hard to say, right? Like unless you're here and then you RNG it, right? But then you have to go here and then she might go this way anyways because it depends on her pathing. So a lot of times I just put her on the same side to make sure, because I'm not trying to 2-step the Diana. I'm trying to just make her so that her first AoE cast kind of hits everybody, right? She'll hit like this whole group like that. So those are all the 5 costs. Now let's talk about specifics. I think there's a couple specifics that we should talk about. An example is Ahri. So Ahri, if you don't know, let's just put in, let's just make a Bastion frontline, right? Something like this, sure. And let's make shapeshifters again for the enemy team. So we're going to put the enemy team. And remember I was saying before, typically you arrange your units in such a way that you are centering most of your units a lot of the time. Depending on certain matchups, sometimes centering isn't that good, right? Ahri is an example of where you don't want to center your units. You want to put them all off to one side. So I'm going to pick Ahri here in a second. And let's just give Ahri like giga items just so it looks really cool and everybody kind of knows what I'm talking about, right? Let's say you have 3-star Ahri and you have all of these other units upgraded. When you're positioning against Ahri, a lot of times you don't want to put Ahri in either corner. You want to put Ahri in the center. Why do you want to put Ahri in the center? The reason you want to put Ahri in the center is because if you read her ability, she fires an orb towards the enemy and she deals a bunch of magic damage, and then on the return trip, it deals a bunch of true damage. What does that mean? True damage basically bypasses defensive stats. So if someone has like a bunch of armor or a bunch of magic resist, true damage will just chew through them. So she's really good at destroying tanks. Ahri is a little bit more difficult to deal with shapeshifters because shapeshifters, the biggest counter to true damage is just having a shit ton of HP. So shapeshifters have a bunch of HP, so it's very difficult to deal with sometimes. But essentially, you want to put her in the middle because if you read her really closely, you'll notice that she doesn't have damage reduction on her ability. Some other units, so for example, let's take Ezreal. Ezreal hits multiple units. Dash to the ideal spot within 3 hexes, then fire a blast in a line, reduced by 25% for each enemy hit. So Ezreal, he jumps around. It's hard to position Ezreal because he dashes to the ideal spot, quote unquote. That's up to Riot to decide. So it doesn't matter if you put him here, it doesn't matter if you put him here, it doesn't matter if you put him here. Ezreal will just find a random spot and then try and hit a bunch of enemies. So it's very difficult to position around Ezreal because it's always jumping around. You can't really predict it. However, Ahri, the main thing with Ahri, besides like just being stationary, unlike Ezreal, is that she doesn't have the same damage reduction. So she gets a lot of value by hitting multiple units. So what do you want to do? You don't want to put your units kind of like this, because look, this Ahri, she's going to target this Swain, and then she'll delete the Swain, right? Because she'll just do boop, she'll shoot her ball, and the ball will come back, and the Swain's going to get deleted, right? This isn't good value. What would be better value? If you move this Lilia, and what you usually see is people are usually playing like Poppy Reroll or Bastions or Rise and all of those units. You see them put all of the units off to one side. Why are you putting Ahri in the center and everybody off to one side? Because, let's say this Nasus, most people will position their front line in such a way that they have everybody put in the same spot. The Nasus will walk up. Look at that. Isn't that magical? The Nasus will walk up because he doesn't have a target. He's a 1-hex attacking unit. Now, if the Nasus walks up here, what happens? The Ahri's going to target the Swain. Oh shit, look at that. Ahri's hitting Nasus. And on the back trip, she's going to hit Nasus again. You're getting so much more value because you're melting 2 units at once. Obviously, you can't tell what's going to happen much later in the fight, but that's why you always see people position as such. You always want tank, Ahri, and open space. Sometimes when there's like really, like, you know, obviously if this guy's positioning like this, you know, it gets a bit scary because these units are all going to walk up and then oopsie doopsie, somebody's going to be on the Ahri, and then it's up to your Ahri to like delete everybody in one go. So sometimes it's a little bit awkward. You could position something like this, right? Where you have like a little bit, you have an extra unit here to make sure that you don't get wrapped on, or you don't get some melee unit just walks up and does some crazy shit. But typically you'll be fine if you position as such, just because if they have their units positioned towards the center, then these ones will walk up. And obviously, if they see this, there's many ways to counter it. Obviously, you can do like a bipartisan front line. You can spread out your front line such that you don't have as many units that Ahri's targeting as easily. It's very susceptible to wrapping, like I said, because, you know, eventually this Elise, she might go here, but she also might target the Ahri, especially if they have like a 2-hex range. But a lot of times, you're just better off positioning your front line to mirror the other front line, right? Because here, Ahri's only going to hit 1 because there. And that's where the main positioning, right? If the opponent has all their units on the same side, then you want to quickly pivot and put all of these on the opposite side and move your Ahri over so that the same thing applies. These ones walk up, and then Ahri just melts all of them, right? But the way to counter it is that it's like a handshake, as a rock, paper, scissors. You want to position around them in that manner. In terms of the other units, the only other one is like Akali, but Akali's similar to like Akali's similar to the other melee units. She will dash to the furthest unit in 3 hexes though. So Akali's kind of weird because 3 hexes isn't that much of a range. So let's say these are the melee units, and then you put her here, and let's say Akali's over here. Let's put a backline units. We'll take Varus again for sake of example. If you count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. As you can see, Akali's range is not far enough to hit a backline unit unless she like completely walks up. So Akali, you have to really think 2 steps ahead, similar to like Fiora, just because it's 3 hexes. It's not 4 hexes. So, you know, unless you get your Akali to like walk up all the way here, she probably won't dash to Varus, and then at the same time she could dash to the Nasus because this is also 3 hexes away, right? It's a little bit difficult for the Akali to wrap instantly. So a lot of times you have to think 2 steps ahead. So let's just remove all of these, right? If you have Akali and she dashes one way versus another, right? Over here, she will dash to the furthest enemy, so she'll dash towards the Elise on her cast because it's 3 hexes away. She'll end up here or here. And now in both of these spots, she's in range of both the Nasus as well as the Varus, so she might be able to dash and hit the Varus. You should always look for a path that's 2 steps away. So it's like I position here, like the first positioning, wherever you put her in your front line, or if you put her in a second row in order to target a certain unit, it's pretty easy to predict where she'll go the first time. And then based on that, you have to try and position so that the second time she jumps on the backline unit and kills them. Akali isn't that much in the meta anymore because she got nerfed quite a bit. I always don't think this Akali is that good because a lot of times on the way to get to the backline, she just fucking dies. And then by the time she gets to the backline, she then just dashes away before the backline dies. It's very hard to make her work unless you have like really, really good augments and really, really good items. But generally, you're trying to think in 2 steps when you're playing Akali. So let's go over all the other units. There's nothing else really. Like all these units are very like similar in concept. The main idea is like if you can hit the backline, you want to be on the same side, right? So in this case, if Tristana has something like a Runans, for example, you usually want to be on the same side. If the opponent, where's Runans? So I can just show it, for example. You usually want to be on the same side just because a stray bullet can kill the enemy tank, right? You have a clear shot where a stray bullet can basically just kill somebody. But typically, it's not only positioning what's best for you, it's also just being scared of other people. So for example, I have Runans, it hits random enemies anyway, so it doesn't matter. If there's a Rise here, I don't want the Rise to accidentally kill my Tristana, so I always want to position opposite to the Rise. So there's like this dance that you're going to have where you have to decide where you're going to position, and usually it's the person that's the strongest that you want to worry about the most. So if you're in your matchmaking pool, if there's 3 or 4 people that you're playing, always position for the person that's the strongest or the person that's contesting you for a spot. So let's say like, you know, you're playing for 4th, you're 1 life, there's another guy that's 1 life, and you're both going to go 4th. You should position for that guy because if you beat that guy, then you'll get 4th and you'll grief that guy, right? You should always position in such a way that it best affects your position. So, you know, you shouldn't worry about somebody who's 1 life about to die if you're many lives, because it doesn't matter if that person dies or not, they're probably dead anyways. You should position for the person that's contesting your spot. If you're playing for 1st and there's a guy in 2nd place that's really healthy, you should position for that guy, because it doesn't matter if you knock off the guy that's in 8th place. What matters more is that you position and you properly position for the person that is the closest to you and the most threat to your game plan. Now, that being said, there's some other general rules of thumbs. So let's say I'm positioning like this. Let's say we both have a Varus carry, or this guy has a Rise, I have a Varus, and let's say my front line is fucking incredible, right? Let's say I have Mordekaiser, and I have Rumble, and I have Blitzcrank, and I have Tahm Kench, right? Like I have a really fucking meaty front line, right? Let's say this guy's all his units are 1 star, right? Let's say they're all 1 star. And let's say I have Blitz 3, Mordekaiser 3, Rumble 3. Rise isn't a good example here because Rise, you always want to be on opposite side. Let's say it's Varus versus Varus, right? It's Varus versus Varus in this house, right? Let's say I have all upgrades, right? I'll put 2-star Tahm Kench, right? Let's say strong front line. And let's say weak. If you have a stronger front line than the opponent, a lot of times it's often better to just put your dude on the same side, right? Why do you put your dude on the same side with the, like, this isn't always the case, but it's something I wanted to mention just in case you run into this situation. If I know for a fact that this guy's front line is going to be dead before my front line, let's say we fight and this is the end of the game, right? Having the Varus on the same side, it eliminates some of the RNG of the match, because let's say this guy has better Varus items. Let's say this guy has like let's say this guy has a Varus 2 and I have a Varus 1, right? This Varus might delete this front line and kill my Varus. So what I want to do is, if I have a stronger front line, a lot of times like something like this will happen. They'll walk up, right? You'll end up with a board like this. I want my Varus to start targeting this guy. Let's say he has 2 backline units. This is more of an example when there's 2 backline units, right? Let's say he has a Tristana over here and a Varus over here. I don't want to put my Varus on opposite side because my Varus is going to walk up and this guy's going to waste time killing the Tristana. And while my guy's wasting time killing the Tristana, this Varus has a chance to kill these and make a comeback. So a lot of times, if you have a better front line than your opponent, you want to position on the same side as the enemy carry because you don't want to like waste your time with some cannon fodder. You want your Varus to target this guy as soon as he's within range so that you kill the enemy carry and then like maybe your front line's dead, but now at least your carry's still alive and he has just shit left over. So that's another thing. If you have a stronger front line than your opponent and you think you will outlast your opponent, it doesn't matter what the back line is, you should try and put on the same side because you're trying to target their enemy first. That's just the general rule of thumb. So in short, for positioning guide, the main thing, if their enemy has, if you have backline access and they have they have backline access, you want to be on the opposite / same side. Right? So if you have backline access, you want to be on the same side of the carry. If they have backline access and you're scared that your backline is going to get sniped, you want to be on opposite side to be safe. If you are ramping up, like if you ramp up like a Kalista, you always want to be on opposite side because you want her to get as many Gwynsu stacks as possible so she can one-shot everything at the end. If you have a good front line, you might want to position same side. I don't think I missed any of the units in particular in terms of placement, but that's like a general rule of thumb. I showed you some of the stuns and some of the other units. Before we end today, I did want to show you 1 or 2 real life examples of me positioning in some games. So I'm going to go pull those up real fast. So this is an example of positioning with a Zephr that I wanted to show everybody. So I'm going to show you these couple games as like a real life example so that you guys can kind of take that with you into the rest of the game. So something I didn't mention is Zephyr's. So here, for example, this is a mage game that I was playing. I'm not going to upload this VOD to YouTube just because I already have, like, you know, I already uploaded a lot of mage videos. So this one's exclusive to this video, so you might not have seen it before. Let me just get my inking working real fast. All right, perfect. So I have a Zephr here, right? Zephr, what Zephr does is it raises and stuns the unit on the opposite side of the board relative to where the Zephr is. So if you watch this fight, you'll see that I'm frontlining the Zephr because on this dummy, I'm pretty strong right now, and I also want this dummy to die because it has the treasure chest that drops items. So I don't care about the Zephr too much, but basically I just lift up a unit as you saw. And the Zephr positioning is really, really important. If you have a Zephr, you can cheese, quote unquote, cheese a lot of fights. And these examples are going to be Zephr positioning, not exactly game positioning, because those ones are pretty obvious, right? I lose this fight, that's fine. I'm hoping, I think I wrote a timestamp. But anyways, if you have a unit like unstable treasure chest, oops, I did not mean to skip ahead there. If you have like an unstable treasure chest, or if you have some sort of augment that makes it so that like when a unit dies they proc this, or when a unit does this, like suspicious trench coat, sometimes a lot of times if you want a unit to die, you can just solo frontline them. As you can see, I put everybody not in the front line, so I'm solo frontlining because I want them to die first. Additionally, something I didn't mention, I should have put this in the video, so I'll put it right now. Another thing I didn't mention is Wukong, right? If you're playing Wukong Jinx, Wukong, because Wukong gains a bunch of extra armor based on his abilities. See, the passive, you gain extra bonus armor. A lot of times the best Wukong placement, if you're playing like a Wukong Jinx reroll, for example, which I've done on my video, is that which I've done on my channel, I've done many videos on it. What you would do is you'd make like gargoyles. When you have gargoyles, a lot of times you want to solo frontline the unit. Why do you want to solo frontline them? You want to solo frontline them because for every unit targeting the gargoyle, they get extra armor. So you want them to be isolated. You want them to gain as much armor from the gargoyle because they gain an extra 10 for each enemy that's targeting them. And then additionally, you'll get a bunch of extra armor because of Wukong's passive. This works with other gargoyle items. It also works with items that you want to die. You want that unit to die. Like, for example, treasure chest that gives a bunch of items. So in this case, for example, if I have a Jinx a backline, if I have Runan's Jinx, I'll put her on the same side trying to snipe an enemy carry. If I don't have Runan's Jinx, I'll just put her somewhere else. And then even if you have other frontline units, you just put them the hell away from the Wukong because you want the Wukong to soak up as much of the extra armor, because he's just going to get so much value and he's going to be basically unkillable. That's why the Wukong Jinx line kind of works. So that's a separate point that I just forgot to mention that I'll put in right now. Anyways, for this matchup, so you might look at it and you might think, okay, sure, this guy's playing, I need to move this a little bit. I can move it over here. So I'm solo frontlining it for now. I think you'll see me fight an Ahri player. I forget when I fight the Ahri player. So the Ahri player is doing that normal Ahri positioning, which is kind of like whatever. But you'll see here. So I'm fighting the Ahri player. I moved the Zephr to specifically target the Ahri. So the Zephr specifically targets the Ahri. So this guy loses most of his damage. As you can see, he's doing that Ahri positioning where he's trying to make my units walk up so that the Ahri double hits as many as possible. I basically removed the main damage dealer on this guy's team, and that sways the fight a lot. Now, obviously, I'm mages and I'm very strong, but removing the Ahri basically allows a lot of my front line to live, allowing my back line to do extra damage, and it wins me this round. So this was a round that I won on positioning alone. So that's very, very important to note, and it's very, very good. Now, obviously with Zephr, that's why they say it's a cheese. It's very cheesy. It's very, very cheesy. Why is it cheesy? Because if that guy probably wasn't paying attention to the fact that as Zephr, he didn't really scout my board. I immediately just played specifically to target that guy to win that particular round because I was scared about him. As you can see, we're the final two now. So we're going to do this little handshake of how do I position around this. I can't do the same Zephr cheese. As you can see, I try and put the Zephr in the front line now. I'm trying to like bait it so that the last second I can move it. But this guy will probably move his Ahri at the last second, right? So as you can see, I try and position. I don't think it works. This guy doesn't even scout my board, so it's not like he scouted my board and he figured out that I was playing the art thing. And oh wait, sorry, this is one more round. Sorry, somebody FF'd, so it was just an awkward positioning. So once again I put this in the front line. I'm trying to decide where I put it to try and target this Ahri. So it's really difficult. I put it here. The round ends, and you'll see that he moves his Ahri because he knows that I might be baiting, that I'm not gonna actually use it in my front line. And you can watch this fight, and you will see that I probably lose this round, or it's close. But this guy's scaling as well. He has a Zephr too, so it's actually very scary. I think I still win this fight. Maybe it's gonna be close. No, I just lose this fight because of the Zephr positioning. So I think what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to position, and like you'll see, basically like this is the mind game aspect of positioning. Whenever you're in a 1v1 or in a very narrow positioning, you always want to try and like RNG it almost. Like you just gotta try and bink it one time. That's why having multiple lives is really good. So here I'm just gonna position in the front line. The reason I'm positioning in the front line is because I probably can survive one more hit. That's my thought process. I either win the fight or I survive one more hit. So here I just put mittens on this dude. I'm just trying my best to do as much damage as possible. I think he moved his Ahri again, but I basically put the Zephr in the front line because I kind of gave up on that. But it's mostly to trick this guy because what I'm going to do next turn, I'm going to try and Zephr the Ahri again. But I try to reset myself, try and bait him out. I win this round, which is great. If I lost this round, it would have been fine. But I don't want to waste, because this guy has unstable treasure chest, I don't want to waste it by putting in the back line. Because like obviously if you had two backline traits, I would just try and snipe the Ahri. But I do get a lot of value from having him in the front line because the unstable treasure chest gives a bunch of items to all my dudes. And also it contributes to the front line. A lot of times people will think, oh, put the golem in the back line, trap the golem if he has gem, do all of these crazy tricks. The golem contributes to the front line a lot. And as you can see, I don't have that much front line. But as you can see here, I think I'm going to move this right at the last second, maybe? Oh, no, I think I lose this fight, and then I move it. We'll see what I do. I keep it in the front line here. I'm basically just removing the main tank, which is good enough. I think I lose one of these fights, and then I move it back in the back line. But basically, I'm like, okay, I'll just... my thought process is I'll just put it in the front line. And then once I... Once this guy's low enough in HP, because I have to win a lot of fights, I'm going to snipe the Ahri and then just guarantee the win on the last round. Because now he's not paying attention to my Zephr placement because he's just working on his own board. But as you can see, he's also kind of greeding a little bit because he had a lot of HP. He's level 10 now. So his board spiked after neutrals. He's level 10. Right? everybody upgraded, really strong, good augment here. So what do I do in this fight? Because I need to cheese out a win. You'll see how close it is. I position this for the Ahri because he's not going to be paying attention to it. Because it's been like 2 or 3 rounds I haven't backlined it, so he's not scouting anymore. I removed the Ahri, and that guarantees me a win in this game. Right? This was a game I pretty much just like won it off positioning. Obviously, my board's really strong, but if you look at this fight, try and tell me that's not a positioning diff. Like, I literally won with like 1 life on my dude. Right, if the Ahri got 1 more cast off, don't I lose this game? I don't go first. And one last example, just to show you what else you can do for positioning. This is another mage game, by the way. I was playing a lot of mages on my off time. So, right here. This guy was really positioning against me well. So, I position... Nami usually you put in the middle. You should always move your units around, right? In a lot of these fights, when somebody's positioning really actively... So, I put Nami in the center because I just want Nami to try and hit one of the backline units. He has 2 carries on either side. And he has a Nami as well. So what I do here is I have enough lives to spare. I'm just moving it back and forth because I don't want to bait him one way or the other. I'm just making it so it's like pretty much just RNG. This is something else you can do. I wouldn't recommend always doing this, but if you see somebody positioning a lot around you, I just keep swapping him back and forth. I messed up my last little click, and I ended up getting on the right side. I think I got on the right side 2 times, and that was enough for me to win the game. Because I just have to guess right twice. So I just, like, you know, enough coin flips. You know, we have, like, 2 or 3 chances at a coin flip. But like I said, you want to be opposite side of the Nami, and same side as the Rise. So, I always want my Vigor to be here, targeting the Rise, and the Nami missing my Vigor. Right? That's the best way I could position. And then I do the same thing. Just swapping, moving my units around a lot. And then I scam out this victory because I get a mage +1, so I get 7 mage with the Arcana. This time I'm on the same side as the Nami and the Rise, so I got on the worst spot. But I was able to spike my board off a charm, so I was able to win the fight. But you should always be moving your units around as much as possible. Even if you're not specifically positioning around somebody else, even if somebody's not watching your board, you should also work on just moving your units occasionally. Because you want to confuse people if they're looking at your board. You don't want them to like look at your board, see you move, because a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, he just moved, he's faking it, and then he'll move the other way. You always want to try and like represent something else and like try and not show your hand or show your tell, and that can get you a lot of placements. That's just like general positioning though. Anyways, hopefully that was an enjoyable video. I tried to make like a quick little guide with positioning. If you liked it, make sure to like and subscribe if it was useful, and thank you. Hopefully that helped out. Mostly this is more towards like beginners that might not know how to place some of the units because they're not as familiar with some of them. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit. Thank you. Bye bye.